Well, hello to you all, wherever you happen to be. I am your host, Michael Hinkson, and this is Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad that you joined us today. Our guest is Robert Moment, and Robert is a sought after authority in leadership development. He's written a number of books, he's a coach, and all sorts of other kinds of things. Talking to coaches is always really kind of fun. I learn a lot. I got all this free coaching. What can I say? It's always interesting and relevant to hear different points of view and get to put everything in perspective. So I'm really glad to have the opportunity this time to talk to Robert. And he does a lot of leadership development and interested in getting into that and talking about him as well. So enough of that. Robert, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad you're here.
Well, thank you, Michael, for the opportunity. I'm excited.
Well, we're really looking forward to talking with you and learning a lot, I hope. Tell me a little bit about the early Robert, kind of growing up, and let's start with that, just kind of where you came from and all that stuff.
Well, the early Robert, I grew up about 30 minutes outside of Charlottesville, Virginia, and I graduated. Really, I would say I'm a country boy at heart. Humble beginnings, and my father, he was ex-military, and one of the things he taught my brother and I'm 2 years younger than my brother, was self-discipline and to always believe in yourself. That's something that my parents ingrained in us, early on, and that's something, it's like it's in my DNA, and that's what I communicate to my clients. And even when I was in corporate America, I was in corporate America for over 20 years, working for Fortune 500 companies like your Xeroxes of the world, Citigroup, Manpower. And then I transitioned into leadership and executive coaching.
So, where did you go to college?
I went to college. Now it's called Washington Adventist University. It's about, I would say, 20 minutes outside of Washington, D.C., in a place called Tacoma Park, Maryland. And my degree is in business administration.
But you're mostly stuck in a rut, aren't you? You've lived in Virginia basically all your life.
Yes, I have. Now I've traveled globally, but yes, my home base is, yes, Virginia.
Now, I have to tell all of you listening that before we started this, Robert was saying that he loves the spring and summer and is not a winter person. So I'm not quite sure I totally understand the paradox, but there you are. But no, it's fine. You could be further north in Massachusetts and Maine and New Hampshire and get a whole lot more snow than you get in Virginia.
You know what, Michael? When I watch TV, whether it's the Weather Channel or CNN, and I see the snow in Boston, upstate New York, and Rochester and Syracuse, I am glad I'm in Northern Virginia.
Boy, it was interesting if you remember from the Weather Channel last year. Here out in Southern California, we had crazy, crazy weather. In Mammoth and some of the areas around here, they had, overall more than like 50 feet of snow, and it eventually went away. But we had incredible amounts of snow in Tehachapi and Wrightwood. The snow was so high that it covered the roofs, and some roofs collapsed because they couldn't take all of the snow. And the roads were blocked so people couldn't get in and out, which also made it very interesting. And we here in Victorville, we're down in a little valley. We're about 2,850 feet above sea level. We had 2 or 3 inches of snow one Saturday afternoon, and that was it.
Wow, I did see that. I saw that, and I said, I couldn't believe it. Yeah, it was dangerous, treacherous. Yeah, it really paralyzed a lot of people because they couldn't leave the homes. So, yeah.
Yeah, they couldn't at all. And the thing is, like Mammoth, I think it was Mammoth, didn't even close their ski season until last August. Well, this year it's different. They're closing Sunday. Still, it's a while. Well,
it is. Yeah.
So you said you worked for a lot of corporations for quite a while. So you started that, I assume, right out of college because you had the business background. And what did you do for them?
Well, I was like, for instance, corporate executive, sales, business development, account manager, a lot of titles, but I learned a lot, especially back then, like Xerox Corporation, you went through a lot of training.
Yeah.
And that training, that really, I was able to leverage it and, transfer it to other corporations. And one of the things I learned, it really wasn't so much that when I transferred to other organizations, because I was in telecommunications, I was in insurance, manpower is more about human development. It was really about building
Yeah.
people skills and then business acumen, because you can learn the products and the services, but to be able to build relationships, that was really one of my strongest suits.
Well, Xerox Information Systems back a long time ago in part began because they acquired a company I worked for, Kurzweil Computer Products. So I was sort of assimilated into Xerox because I worked for Kurzweil and then Xerox bought Kurzweil. They wanted the technology, though. They didn't really have as much interest in the people, as demonstrated by the fact that within a couple of years, all the salespeople who worked for Kurzweil pre-Xerox takeover were all invited to leave. And, those things happen.
Yes.
And I think it's a serious mistake when companies do that because they lose all the tribal knowledge and all the information and the background that people have. And like you talked about the fact that you learned so much about people skills and interpersonal dynamics as you went along. And I think that companies really lose a lot of that when they buy a company and they assimilate it and then they get rid of the people.
I'm glad you touched on that, because I'm working with a potential client and they want to buy this smaller cybersecurity startup. And when you do that, a lot of times, you got to look at the culture. And when you mention that they let people go, a lot of times good people who've been there, whether it's, 5 years, 10 years, that's a lot of intellectual property that's walking out the door. And a lot of times, for instance, they know their customers better than the person who's acquiring them.
Why do companies do that?
You know, sometimes, they want to cut costs, but cutting costs sometimes is not good business sense.
Yeah.
Because usually the company who takes over is the one who's going to let the existing employees go in
Right.
most cases, because they want to bring their own people. But when I want to talk to the CEO, if he become a client, that's something I want to warn and caution him. Don't go and say, "Oh, I want a clean house and want to bring all of my people in," because this company does have some major business with several major hospitals. And, that's relationship building. And that relationship building took years for them to, when I say years, maybe about, I think they said 5 or 6 years. So
Well, yeah, go ahead.
So that's important. That relationship, the existing company has that relationship. And I would tell him, you want to make a smooth transition.
Well, and the reality is at some point you can bring your own people in, but you're going to have to hire people to replace the people you move and other things. At some point, it would make a lot of sense to really evaluate people and their skills and look at what they bring to the company before you just let them go. I was the last sales guy to be let go from Kurzweil, and I had been relocated actually in late 1981 from Boston. Well, I lived in Winthrop and we worked in Cambridge. And then I was relocated back out to California because I knew that area better. And it was pre Xerox takeover, but the discussions had begun. But in late 1983 into 1984, it was clear that Xerox had taken the company and some people were leaving. I was the last of the sales guys to be let go. I don't know whether that had to do with blindness or whether I was just so far remote because I was cross country, but they did it nevertheless. And I think that they made a serious mistake by losing, if you will, so many people. It just isn't a bright idea to do.
It isn't, because even when I was there, Michael, Xerox was losing a lot of market share.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was there, they was losing. When
Now,
I came,
when were you there?
I was there like in the 1992, and they was losing a lot of market share to um it's Canon,
Yeah. And
um,
IBM.
IBM. Yes, they was losing a lot of market share, and they became complacent.
Yeah. They did, and didn't, and probably never really had a clue about why they were losing so much market share, but nevertheless it happened.
Yeah, I mean Xerox was. I mean, in terms of, I mean, too top heavy in terms of, I mean, it seems like every quarter they was hiring people, but in terms of market share, yeah, they was losing market share. Um, and then a company called Ose came in, Rico. The Japanese, the Xerox almost went under.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I one of the reasons I was asked to relocate to California, and like I said, they had just started the discussions, but because I had spent time on and lived on the West Coast for most of my life, the other thing they wanted me to do was to interface with the more technical parts of Xerox, namely, they had a facility called PARC, Palo Alto Area Research
Yes.
Center.
Yes.
I wonder if that's still there. Do you know?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
I don't
either.
know. Yeah.
But I did a lot of work to integrate some of the information from Kurzweil into PARC, which is part of what I did. And it was fun. Got to meet a lot of and know a lot of the people there. And I would have thought that they would have been a little bit smarter about how they dealt with me, but and other people. But it goes the way that it goes. I hear it a lot in the broadcast industry. Somebody comes in and they buy a radio station or a television station, and they phase out all the people who are already working there, which is so crazy.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that too. And I've actually here I can't think of what what station, but yes, I've heard that. And that's consistent, I think, across the board.
Yeah, it is. Um, well, and I think it's a little bit different, not necessarily totally, but a little different because what they're doing is they're probably changing formats and other things, and they want to bring in people who are familiar with. But I also do think that they don't look at the value that, if you will, tribal knowledge, even in a radio environment, can play. So what do you do? Well, you said something earlier interesting. You said that your parents brought you up being very self-assured, self-confident, and so on. And I think that's an important feature and skill that we ought to have. Do you ever find though that you're too self-confident and it kind of transitions over into arrogance as opposed to just self-confidence?
You know, one of the things my father taught us, you have to be careful about ego, because he said ego, that can be blind confidence,
Yeah.
and blind confidence, that's tied to external validation, you know. And he said, really self-belief is about trusting, trusting your inner knowing. And not only trusting your inner knowing, it's, your instincts, and just know deep down, you are capable of overcoming challenges and achieving goals. And, he even taught us, even said this, and I don't know, he didn't invent this, but he said, ego is edging God out. And you want to focus on um, just trust and believe yourself. You're going to have challenges, but you really have to, it's a fine line. That ego, confidence is great, but that ego, that goes beyond confidence. That's, sometimes you don't even really look at reality. Like you feel like you're invincible. And I think when you think you become invincible, That's when arrogance and ego come in.
Hmm. If you're really invincible, you don't have to show it. It is just the
Yes.
way it goes. Well, have you ever had a time in your life when you experienced something that really caused you to face a major challenge and doubt yourself? And how did you deal with that?
My first corporate executive position, that inner critic came up. And the inner critic is, do I have what it takes? Am I good enough? And how I quieted my inner critics. And it still comes up sometimes, even now, with opportunity. But I have to say to myself, I have to take inventory. Look at your past successes, look at your past wins, and look at the skills that you bring to the table. And those skills are transferable, whether it's a client that I'm coaching now or a future client, bigger client. But just because sometimes, when the opportunity comes, we excited, we get excited about the opportunity, Michael. But then, like I said, for me, that inner critic is like, okay, are you ready for this? And I have to remind myself, yes, you are. You have more than enough. You are enough, and you can do this.
So, what really happened that caused a lot of self doubt with that first job?
The responsibilities, the revenue that I needed to generate, that I had never had that kind of revenue before, and the people who I was going to manage. But at the end of the day, I said, you know what? They would not have given you this position, and if they didn't think you could do it. And then look at the skills that you have. And once again, I took audit in terms of the skills, my transferable skills, and I was able to succeed. But still, that inner critic, inner voice, that happens even now as a coach.
How do you how do you get past that inner voice doing that?
I created an acronym. An acronym is BELIE, BELIE. And it starts with I begin self awareness and I understand my strengths and I understand my weaknesses. And then E, I embrace my imperfections. And because everyone has them, but what makes me unique? And then L, I learn from my setbacks. I know there's obstacles and opportunities for growth. And then I invest in self care. I prioritize my physical and mental well being. And then E, I empower that inner voice to silence any negative self talk. And I just focus on the positives.
One of the things that we talk about on Unstoppable Mindset, and I've said it a number of times, so I hope people don't get too bored, but I think it's important to say. I used to always say I'm my own worst critic. I listen to speeches when I give them. Um, I did it some when I was program director at the campus radio station at UC Irvine, KUCI. I've done it a lot of times. I listen to myself, and I always used to say, I'm really hard on myself. I'm going to be harder on myself than anyone else because I'm my own worst critic. And actually, only over the last year have I realized wrong approach. I'm not my own worst critic. I do believe in and have always believed in the kinds of things that you're talking about, introspection, self-analysis, and so on. And what I realized is that in reality, no one can teach me anything. They can provide the information, but I'm the only one who can teach me. And I've changed from saying I'm my own worst critic to saying I'm my own best teacher. And the reality is that just totally reshapes the attitude. And I will tell you that it also helps in dealing with that inner voice, because when I start to think about that, I think about, okay, how do I teach me? Well, it goes back to self-analysis. It goes back to introspection. What worked today? Why didn't that go as well as I thought that it should? And it could be I was just too confident. And I've got to be open enough to acknowledge that. And okay, so what do you do to make sure that doesn't happen again? So I love the approach of I'm my own best teacher, because it's such a positive and more constructive way of helping to guide you into introspection and real self-analysis.
I love the concept. You know, I would say, isn't that owning your power?
Sure.
Yeah, I would say that's Michael, that's owning your power.
It is it's owning your power, and it's owning your actions and what you do. And when you acknowledge that, then you can sit back and look at it and go, okay, so let's discuss, brain, what happened. But that's exactly right. And I would rather look at things with something that will really move me forward rather than saying, let's criticize. Other people can criticize me, but then ultimately I have to go back and listen to and look at what they say and decide, okay, um, where's the merit? They're saying it, maybe there's something to it, but is there really, or how much? And take it to heart, but come to a decision and move forward.
I call it, I would, reframing. And that's a major pivot shift in terms of your mindset and your thought process.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of times we can be our own worst enemy. And like you said, our own worst critic. But how you're reframing it from a positive more so than a negative, because most people they start with the negative instead
Yeah.
of the positive.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like how you're reframing that, because just like, for instance, that self-talk, you can say, I'm not good enough. Well, say I am good enough. You know,
Mm-hmm.
just that slight reframing, because I always words have power. If you continue to repeat something, you will believe it.
And you can also say, how can I get better?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And take the time to really analyze it, because I believe that ultimately, when we look at ourselves, we can, if we practice it and develop that mind muscle, we really know the answers. But we have to listen to get them to come to the surface so we can deal with them. Um, the fact of the matter is, we know a lot more than we think we do. We underestimate ourselves. And so often something comes up and suddenly we think of an answer, but we go, oh no, that's too easy, or no, that can't be it. And we go back and, yeah, you see what I'm saying. And we go back
Yes.
and overthink it and then come up with what turned out to be the wrong answer because we wouldn't listen to ourselves with the right answer.
You know, I feel as though the universe is always talking to us. And sometimes we have to be still. And for instance, if I'm coming up with a book title, like you said, if it's too easy, it's like, well, that's too easy. Well, no, that's probably the book title that you need,
Yeah.
or the article title. You know, a lot of times we think if it's too easy, um, that's not the solution. But here's something I learned in corporate America. Here's an example. A client had a problem. Let's say it could be any problem. And we, meet with the client. The client, they have 5 people, representing that company. And maybe we have 3 or 4. And they said, they've had this problem 6 months. And I'm listening to the client and I said, this is the solution. And I remember telling a VP, I wasn't at the VP level yet. We had a debrief, like in the lobby after the meeting, and I said, this is the solution. This is the solution to the client's problem. And this is what he said. He said, no, that's too, he said, not, the meeting lasted maybe almost 2 hours. And he said, no, he said, you know what? A client, we can't go back to the client and say, that's the solution, because they had the problem, he said, for over 6 months. And what we want to charge the client, we got to drag this out. And I said, why drag it out? They got a problem. And he said, they will not believe that we solved this problem within 2 hours. So he was a VP.
Yeah.
And Michael, we went through, I want to say, this is years ago, 5 or 6 meetings, and the solution, it was the right solution. 6 meetings, and then finally we tell the client, okay, we have come up with the solution. And that's when I think I said, I don't think I'm going to be in corporate America too long after that.
You know, and I've talked about it a few times after leaving Kurzweil because I was dismissed, as it were, or Xerox actually at that point. I couldn't find a job because people wouldn't hire a blind person. And it's still way all too often the case. The unemployment rate is, incredibly high. Depending on where you are, it could be 60, 65%, significantly higher. And I was looking for a job and wasn't finding one. And so what I eventually did was I started my own company selling computer-aided design systems to architects. A blind guy selling CAD systems, why not? I
Right.
didn't need to work the system, but I did need to know how to work the system so that I
Right.
could describe it to people. Well, anyway, as we started working with architects and so on, they would say, well, we can't, as much as this system works and all that, we can't take on this system because we charge by our time, with our effort and our time. And if we use the CAD system, we'll get done in a fraction of the time. And so we'll not make as much money. Well, my response was, you are looking at it all wrong. You're bringing in new technology. You're bringing in so much more capabilities because you could bring a customer in and you can do walkthroughs and fly-throughs and show them exactly what it looks like looking out a window from inside a building and all sorts of stuff. They can say they want to change something and they can make the change, or you can make the change as they suggest it. You're not charging for your time anymore. You're charging for your expertise. You don't need to charge less, but you're charging for all the expertise and the skills and the added value that you bring to the sale. And the architects who got that, and there were some who did and some who didn't, but the architects who got it really began doing extremely well because they could also then go off and look for more customers more quickly.
Quickly. Yeah.
And we really need to remember that there are on a regular basis new and better solutions coming up, and it's hard to keep up with everything. But by the same token, if we can be aware of what we need to do to make everyone's lives better with whom we work, we're going to do better because they're going to do better.
I totally agree. Because, when I'm working with clients, even if the first 2 sessions I have a solution, I'm not going to say, okay, you know what? Hold on to this solution until coaching sessions in 6 months into the coaching session. That's, yes, for me, it's integrity. That's one. But two, I want all of my clients to succeed as fast, as quick as possible. And, I remember, gosh, when I started out, this client, I said, one of the questions I was asked, have you ever had a coach before? And he said, yes, I had a coach before. And I said, well, how did it work out? And he says, I felt as though he had solutions or could help me, but he dragged out the process. And I said, okay, that's not going to happen with me. Because then I thought, I thought back of my experience when I was in corporate America.
Yeah.
When you have the solution, but, I think I really want to coach him for another 6 months, not for 2 days or, 2 weeks. So, yeah.
Well, you could coach him for another 6 months. It's just that you're going to evolve and go in different directions, if that makes sense to do.
Yes, yes.
And if it doesn't, you're going to have a very happy customer who's going to tell other people about you.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, I want to get to your transition, but first, just following up on something we talked a little bit about, how do you really tell the difference between overconfidence, or what you call our inner critic, and or whatever, and the whole real issue of healthy self-evaluation. How do we really make those differentiations?
I would say, in terms of, like I said, ego is self-validation. I'm sorry, self-validation or external validation. When you're talking about self-belief, that's trusting. That's the inner knowing. That's your inner being, your core. Um, and I think that's the difference. And because when you're talking about self-belief, you begin with self-awareness. I don't know anybody who has a huge ego focuses on self-awareness. Um, they don't understand. They're not going to talk about understanding our strengths, understanding our weaknesses. Ego, they just don't. But when you talk about self-belief, self-awareness, and then they embrace their imperfections. To me, that's very, very important. And then, like I said, when you talk about invested in self-care, you do prioritize your mental well-being and also your physical well-being. You take inventory of self.
As you should. And it's something that you, if you're doing it right, probably do on a regular basis.
Yes, that's one thing I tell clients weekly. There's 5 questions I might give them, depending on the individual, to do what I call a mental coaching, self mental coaching each and every week, because mental health, it's prevalent, and especially the higher you are as an executive, the pressure, and self audit. Because even myself, yes, I'm a coach, but coaching people, and they said, well, oh, yeah, that mental health, yeah, I have to still guard my mental health as well.
Yeah. Well, and there's nothing wrong with asking yourself, did I really do that right? Um, what can I learn? How do I move forward? But even just the whole concept of, did I do it right? Did I do what I really should do? Asking yourself that helps so much to assist you in becoming more self-aware. Because if you ask that with an open, curious attitude, you're going to get the right answers, and then you can use it to move forward.
You're right about that. One of the things, coaching, as a coach, I always say to myself after every session, did I ask the right questions? Was I curious enough? And did I go deeper? Because sometimes a client might give me a response, and I try to make sure I don't gloss over that response.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say, you know what, can we go deeper? And then sometimes, I ask for permission. Can we go deeper? Because, for instance, our client a couple of weeks ago, he's had some leadership challenges. And I said, how does transparency, how does empathy, and how does trust show up in your leadership style?
Mm.
And he said, he gave me some examples. And I said, well, can we go deeper? And he said, well, I just gave you some examples. And he said, well, why do you want to go deeper? I said, I'm here to help you. Because with the examples he gave me, it didn't have a lot of substance. And, after the session, he did say this, and, I don't need someone to pat me on the back, but he said, you know what? Now I appreciate you as a coach, because he said, you know what? These 3 things. So I said, journal this week. How does those 3 things show up in your leadership style? And I want to see examples on next session. And that's what I want to be curious, but also I want to go deeper.
Do you record your sessions?
Yes, I do. Yes, yes,
And so the reason for asking that question is, then do you go back um, and listen to them as a learning experience for you as well?
yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes.
which is
Yes,
the point.
yes, yes,
Um,
I do.
because you're your own best teacher.
Yes.
But it sounds like that person had some definite trust issues and um, probably needed to show a little bit more empathy and vulnerability than they were showing.
Yeah, one of the things I did tell him, I said, vulnerability, it's not a weakness. And and then, one of the things when I said when I have to dig deep, a lot of times when clients, it's not just about coaching them on how to become the best executive, but a lot of times it's about the story, the story, their personal lives. Because a lot of times, for instance, here's an example about this was after COVID. This company called me and they said, well, this executive we brought on board, he's a high performer on paper, but he is creating a toxic environment here.
Mm.
And I said, well, I was talking to the chief human resource officer. I said, I'm not understanding this. You said he interviewed well, he was a high performer, he has a great track record, but why is he causing a toxic environment in your organization? And she said, well, we got one or two things that's going to happen. One, if he doesn't turn things around, we don't want to put him on any kind of corrective action, but we will have to, because two people have threatened to leave and they've been here longer than him. So long story short, they said, we're going to offer him coaching. If he doesn't accept coaching and doesn't turn things around, then yes, we're going to put him on corrective action and we'll terminate him. And he accepted coaching. And the one thing, the second session that we had, and that's why I always said, yeah, I have to go deep. And I said, they said, when you're in meetings, that you are not able to accept constructive criticism.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, that's that perception. And I said, so I said, well, but these are some examples that they gave me. And he said, and I said, well, what kind, and I don't know, Michael, something said to me, and sometimes, like I said, it's your intuition,
Yeah.
instinct. I said, what kind of relationship did you have with your father? And this is what he blurted out. All of my life, he's been critical, criticized. I could never do anything right in his eyes.
Hmm.
And I said, can we go deeper? And I said, right now, today, what kind of relationship do you have with your father? He said, I haven't spoken to my father in over 7 years. And I said, what could you tell me why? So he told me why. And I said, well, would you believe this statement that I'm about to make? And I said, you've had this all of your life, not just at this company. And he said, yes, he has. And I said, not able to take constructive criticism. And I said, here's things. I said, I can help you on two levels. I can help you on a professional level and I can help you on a personal level. So he said, well, I told him how I could help him on this professional level, but I said the personal level, that's optional because the company is paying for the professional. The personal, I want to help you on a personal level. And I said, one of the things, are you willing to take this major step that I'm about to ask you to take? And that's to forgive your father.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, first he resisted. And I said, you're going to have this problem your entire life. And long story short, he forgave his father. I walked him through the process. I spoke to his father, actually. We all, and his father had never seen his granddaughter. And his granddaughter, I think, was 4 or 5. And he saw her for the first time that year, that Thanksgiving.
And I assume that the client ended up hopefully doing okay and stayed with the company.
He stayed with the company. He turned things around. Now, this is what I'd say to not just the listeners, even myself. That's one of the reasons why coaching is my calling. It's not just the results, the business results. I want every client to be the best version of themselves, not just in that professional, but also that personal lives. And that to me, um, that probably made my coaching year. Not
Yeah.
how many clients I coach, but just that made my coaching year. For
Yeah.
for a grandfather to see his now his his wife have seen her granddaughter, but his father had never seen, only pictures.
Mm. Well, I'm glad that the father and son made peace, and that is so important. I think there is a whole lot of of connection between the professional parts and the personal parts. One of the reactions I had when you started the story was that in reality, the professional part isn't going to really improve unless the personal part does.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I told my client, you're going to have this your entire life until you resolve it and forgive your father.
Yeah.
And when I talked to the father, Michael, his father was like that. So the cycle was never broken.
Yeah. It so often happens in so many different ways, doesn't it?
Yeah. And you're talking about a father, life is short. And you're talking those many years without speaking to your father, not seeing him. And the worst thing, it didn't happen, but if he'd have lost his father,
Yeah. I was just thinking that.
yeah, if he would have lost his father, man.
What a
And
blessing that didn't happen.
yeah, yes, absolutely. And then not only that, the granddaughter would have never saw her
Her
grandfather.
grandfather. Right.
Yeah.
Well, now let's talk about you again a little bit. So you talked earlier, you told the story of what happened in corporate America, and you said that was kind of one of the things that started you to transition. What finally was the last straw, if you will, that led you to decide to leave corporate America? And how did you decide to go in and transition to just being a coach? Well, not just being, but being a coach and starting your own business.
I can't think of what, well, gosh, it was a year where we was there was a lot of recession and a lot of layoffs. And I had gotten tired of the politics. And I said, I want something new, different, but I don't know what. But I want
Hmm.
to become an entrepreneur because I was selling Christmas cards when I was like in the 5th grade. You could get engraved, personalized. I had a landscaping business, sold T-shirts. So I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, but I just didn't know what I needed to do to make that transition. So what happened was a lot of people, colleagues were getting laid off. And they said, well, can you help me find a job? I'm like, well, I don't know if I can help you find a job. I don't have any connections like that because the companies that I know, they're laying off too.
Yeah.
And they said, well, maybe you can help me interview. I'm like, okay, I can help you interview because I interview very well, I think, because I got the companies I've worked for, I went through 3 or 4 interviews. So I started helping people get hired for jobs. I wasn't charging. It was just, pro bono. And I said, well, they said, you the get hired expert. And I said, I'm not the get hired. They said, yeah, because I started getting referrals.
Mm.
And I wasn't, and I said, well, they said, yeah, such and such said you can help. So, and they said, you're coaching us. I'm like, coaching? Okay. Um, I don't see myself as a coach. But then I realized I was coaching, I would mentor when I was in corporate America. So this is how I started to get paid though, as a coach. A colleague referred this executive to me, and he said he had been with this company like for 15 years. And he said he doesn't know, he really needs to help on job search, interview, And he said, he's going to give you a call. And I said, he said, because I told him you can help me because you helped me get a job. So long story short, he calls me up and this is what he said. He said, I need your help and I want to hire you as a coach. How much do you charge for years of coaching? I want you to help me find a job, help me to interview. I need your help. And when he said charge, I didn't know what to say. I said, well, charge. I almost said, I've been doing this for free. Then
Good
I
thing
said,
you didn't.
yeah, yes. Michael, you're absolutely right, my friend. So I said, I threw out a number, man, for 1 year. I don't know where that number came from. So I threw out the number, and this is what he said. He said, well, how do I pay you? Do I pay you by check, credit card? I didn't have no business account set up or anything. Well, my personal checking accounts or money market. And I said, check. And he says, well, how do you want me to mail you the check? And then he said this. He said, I am going to the bank because I'm getting my severance. I got to work things out. I'm getting my severance package. Can I wire you the money? I said, sure, you can wire the money. So I gave him my account, long story short. And then when the money, I couldn't believe it. I said, you know what? Did I overcharge him?
Yeah, you always ask that, or
Yeah,
undercharge.
right, or undercharge. I said, because that transaction was too quick, too fast. And then I realized after I did some research, I didn't overcharge. And but then you know what happened? When it came close to the first session, I said, oh my God, can I do this? Because this man has given me X number of dollars, and this is my first paying client. And that's when the inner voice came, like, you
Yeah.
know, this man may be asking you for a refund, so don't spend this money. Uh, just put it aside in this account. And even I opened a bit, and then I did open a business account. Don't even touch this money. And you know what? 2 months go by, and then I got past that point because I was telling my father, I said, Dad, I feel like the sessions are going great. And he actually got hired probably within 4 months. He had 2 offers.
Wow.
And then he said, I want you to coach me throughout for the year, of course. And I did not touch that money, Michael, until I felt comfortable, maybe about 6 months. I moved it into, I think I bought some stocks. And I said, okay. But I had some limiting beliefs that I had to get past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did.
Well, it was a new adventure. It was new all the way around for you. You had to discover that the earth really is round and not flat. So it's fair.
Yeah, when I tell even new coaches, when we all gonna have limiting beliefs, and you have to fight through it.
Yeah.
You have to fight through it, because that like I said, my biggest fear was, don't spend the money, because he might ask for a refund. And I've had clients, no one has ever asked me for a refund. But that first client, I was kind of like I said, not I was confident in coaching him, but then I was that inner critic saying, don't spend that money, because you know what? Not that I needed to spend it, but then after that, I started to get more clients because referrals. And I said, you know what? Now is the time to make the leap.
There you go.
And I made the leap.
Yeah. And you've been doing it now, what, about 20 years?
Yeah, about 20 years.
I I find it interesting as a speaker. I was approached by someone who has an event coming up in June, and I quoted a number that I thought was high. But I also say I work with people in their budgets, which I'm willing to do because the World Trade Center happened for me. And excuse me, in reality, while I do earn my living largely with it in speaking, I also want to be out there inspiring and helping and educating. So we negotiate, but I had this one customer literally just this week, and I quoted a number and I figured it was high, and they came back and they said, well, we really looked and that's a lot higher than we expected. We've actually had some comedians that we've been looking at possibly hiring, and they're quoting like maybe 20% of what you're quoting. And I said, I will work with you, but let me point out that I have the visibility and you're hiring me for the inspiration that I bring and the expertise that I bring, as opposed to local comedians. And we'll see what happens. And what's interesting is it's a company that deals with the law. And lawyers don't negotiate a whole lot most of the time. They charge an hourly rate. It's just interesting how people work at things.
One thing I always feel as though my father said this. He said, communicate the value. If you communicate the value and they can see it, price does not become an issue.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
said, communicate the value upfront as much as you can, and then price doesn't become an issue. It's when they don't see the value, then all of a sudden, I got to think about it. Let me talk to, it's just, but when they can see the value, and then what, my coach told me this, one of my first coaches told me this. He said, a lot of coaches want to charge just to get a client, they want to charge low fees. And he said, those will be your worst clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Always will be your worst clients.
He said they will, Robert, he said, they will be, I'm warning you, don't do it.
They're going to suck up your energy.
Yeah,
they're going to do so many things, and they don't pay you for it.
Right.
Yep. Which is one of the reasons I'm resisting. We'll see what happens with this one. It isn't settled yet, and it'll work out.
Yes.
I have had other customers that I know didn't have big budgets. They're nonprofits and things like that. But again, we come to an agreement both in terms of time and what's expected, as well as the money, and that's okay. But
yeah.
it is, because not everybody is going to be able to pay what some bigger corporations will pay. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the other thing that I actually always ask in my speaker contract is, if you like the speech, I want a letter of recommendation, and I want you to refer me to at least 2 other people. And that works.
Yeah, I love that. I love that strategy.
It works pretty well. Well, tell me, what are some practical techniques that you use to boost your self-esteem and self-belief, especially in difficult times? How do you psych yourself up in a good way?
Well, one of the things, self-talk, it's, to me, self-talk is, you can do this. I believe in you. I look at, and also not only that, I look at whether it's a big win or small wins, I look back over my life too. And I said, 10 years, 5 years, even 2 days, you was able to do this. And then I surround myself with very supportive people.
Mm-hmm.
That's key, because I believe, not only do they believe in me, but self-belief in self is contagious.
It absolutely is.
Yeah, it's contagious. And how I challenge, like I said, that inner critic is, I love how you reframe things. It's self-talk, positive self-talk, and focus on your accomplishment and celebrate small wins. It don't have to be big wins. It can be small wins, but celebrate. And then remember this too. I tell, whether it's clients, colleagues, self-belief, it's a journey. It's not a destination. It's like every year you're building muscles, your self-belief muscles, whether it's 5 years, 6 years, but every year you're building through life lessons, failures, setbacks, but you're still building that muscle.
Yep. And when you understand that, that also will help give you the insight to continue to do it.
Yes, because when you learn from setbacks, even obstacles are opportunities for growth. And when you have a growth mindset, you realize through self-awareness, you give a chance to learn, and continue to grow. And then, one of the things too, you know, your dreams deserve a chance. Um, it doesn't matter how big or small, but all of our dreams deserve a chance. And we all have unique talents. And just, focus on your strengths and let them shine.
Yeah. What would you tell listeners who believe their self-belief is at an all-time low? Where do they start?
Well, first of all, you want to take inventory of the skills that you currently have and be grateful for what you have, because we all have unique talents, skills, abilities, and gifts. And a lot of times, I think what happens, people underestimate what they already have and start to take inventory of, like I said, the skills, the talents that you have, and embrace your own uniqueness and also your own imperfections.
Yeah, because if you don't recognize them, then you're never going to be able to deal with them. If you do recognize them, then you can deal with them.
Absolutely. And like I said, once again, give yourself credit for your small victories. It don't have to be big victories, but give yourself credit. Because see, when you give yourself credit for your small victories, Michael, that continues to build momentum.
Yep. Can you give me an example of someone who you believe has unwavering self-belief and what we can learn from them?
Yes, I do. I want to share the story. Her name is Barbara Corcoran. She's that real estate
Ah,
mogul for the Shark Tank.
yes.
Her boyfriend and business partner, she was in real estate. He left her for her secretary, right? And but you know what? That split, what it did for her, I know it was devastating, but it was a catalyst for her success. Because what it did, it fueled her determination to form her own company, which was a Corcoran Group. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, she sold it for about $66 million. So that, to me, resilience in her situation was key. She embraced a new beginning and she looked at failure as a stepping stone.
Which makes a lot of sense. I believe that we should get rid of the word failure from our vocabulary anyway. Failures are not failures. They are simply things that didn't work out as they should. And what are you going to do about it?
Right.
We got to get the negativity out of so much of it.
Yeah, we do. We do. Because, also what in her, she believed in herself fiercely, man. Because she feels as though, she had something to prove. I get that. And guess what? She did.
You have a new book coming out entitled Believe in Yourself, You Got This. Tell me about that.
This is about, I want the reader to really take inventory in themselves. This book is a coaching book. It's going to be it's real simple, but it's going to have questions where they take inventory and really focus on believing in themselves. And not only just believing, but accepting themselves. You can believe in yourself, but I want them to really accept who they are and know that worth, know that value, and know that they have something to bring and add to this world.
Well, if you could leave our listeners with one final thought about self-belief, what would that be?
Own your power. Own your power and don't let anyone hold you back, and take control of your destiny. And then also remember that self-belief is a journey, not a destination.
I love that. If people would like to reach out to you and maybe talk to you about hiring you as their coach or just learning more about you and your books and all that, because you've written several books actually, how do they do that?
They can reach me at Robert at leadershipcoachinganddevelopment.com, or they can connect with me on LinkedIn.
And what's the LinkedIn? Do you know your LinkedIn?
Yes, it'll be Robert Moment Leadership Coach.
Okay. And what was the website again?
The website is leadershipcoachinganddevelopment.com.
Leadershipcoachinganddevelopment.com. Great. Well, I hope people will reach out. This has been insightful. In a lot of ways, I will say validating for some of my beliefs, but also very educational. And as I said at the beginning, I always love speaking to people who coach. I learn a lot, and I've always believed that I'm not doing my job unless I'm learning at least as much as anybody else who listens to the podcast. So I really appreciate your time today. So, Robert Moment, thank you. And I want to thank all of you for listening. I hope that you have found this helpful. If you want to really become a better leader, Robert has lots of ways clearly that he probably can help you, and it's worth exploring with him. So, I hope you'll reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Please give me an email. You can reach me at speaker@michaelhingson.com. Michael Hingson is Michaelhingson, just like it sounds, actually. Speaker@michaelhingson.com. Love it if you'd go to our podcast page. If you would, www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. You can listen to all of our episodes there. But wherever you're listening or watching, I would really value it greatly if you would give us a 5-star rating and review us. We really appreciate people who do that. So any of that you can do, I would really appreciate it. And as I've said many times on these podcasts, if you need to find a speaker to come and inspire and motivate, I'd love to talk with you about that. Email me at speaker@michaelhingson.com. Love to talk with you about that. And Robert, for you and everyone listening and watching, if you know of anyone who you think ought to be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, please let us know. We'd love to meet people who want to be guests. So, Robert, thank you again. I really appreciate you being here. This has been a lot of fun and definitely continued great success.
Michael, thank you. I'm truly grateful, and continued success to you as well.